Chamorro language is the umbilical cord to our culture.
In our history class, we learned about the dramatic changes that occurred in Guam, especially during the past century. In our video project, we ask ourselves and Dr. Laura Souder-Betances, why did the use of Chamorro language decline, and what effect does it have in our community?
And without speaking Chamorro, even though we've convinced ourselves for decades, actually, that speaking Chamorro was not as essential as being Chamorro, we're now understanding that we can't be Chamorro without really speaking our language, because so much of our ethos, so much of our traditional knowledge is embedded in our language. And so we've reached the point, I think, in our community consciousness, thank God, that we don't have to buy the lie that to learn English well, you need to forget Chamorro. Because that was a means by which generations of Chamorros were taught and believed that Chamorro was an interference for learning English. We now know that that's a bunch of baloney, and I hope that we throw that idea into the Marianas Trench forever. And thank God the Marianas Trench is the deepest part of the ocean on Earth. Okay. The reason why this is so important is because language unites communities. Language created the context in which ancient Chamorros related to each other and to the environment, and created traditions. In order for us to understand how those traditions are part of our lives today, we need to communicate those traditions, and it is through language that we communicate those traditions. Several generations of Chamorros from the pre-war period, the naval administration, onward, have lost that connection. Now, why is that so critical? Because our language connects one generation to another. Grandparents, my Nana and her sisters, with whom we were reared, were able to teach us everything through the language. They didn't speak English, and yet we all speak English well. So it's not that we were not capable of operating in two worlds. It's that we were told that one world had more importance than the other. And in believing the English-only policy, we lost a connection to our parents, to our grandparents. So there are generations, several generations of Chamorros who can't communicate in a real sense. I mean, they can talk with, go get this, let's go here, but not really communicate the way that my Nana and her sisters and brothers were able to communicate with my generation. Because language either unites and connects or disconnects if you don't have that skill. And so for Chamorros, there are several generations who feel emptiness. I'll never forget a blog that Desiree Tamanglo, one of the teachers at GCC, wrote after she heard me speak in Chamorro at a GCC event. She wrote a blog saying that she was hungry for Saina. And Saina, for her, meant someone who spoke the language comfortably, not in the touristic sense of the word, hafade, hafatatamanhamzu, but in the sense of communicating values, of communicating feelings, of communicating legacy. And so her piece really brought to my attention the divide that exists when there isn't that connection. It's an alienating divide. And young people, 2-3 generations of Chamorros who have been victims of this policy of English only have been separated from their legacy, and they're orphaned. They're orphaned by that separation. And it's caused by a disruption in language continuity. I think think our consciousness has grown to the point where we now are aware of how language plays a role in connecting people, not only with history, not only with ethos, but with relationships between generations. So children are learning how to speak Chamorro, and their parents don't know how to speak Chamorro. And their parents' parents don't know how to speak Chamorro because they were caught in this what I call it the lie, because we really bought in. Chamorro parents and grandparents believed that they were doing their children honor and justice by not interfering with their learning to speak English. So language connects, and the lack of it can also disconnect. And that has created great divides in our community. The reality is that only 16% of Chamorros speak Chamorro today. And of that 16%, 85% are over the age of 50. If you want to talk about alienation and divide, that speaks volumes about how we're separated when we don't speak our language collectively.
Our conclusions are that not speaking Chamorro divides families along generations. Not speaking Chamorro also divides Guam's diverse community. And speaking Chamorro, therefore, unites families across generations and unites our diverse community.